Many people fantasize about owning a private island, often dreaming of sunny Caribbean beaches or the tranquil waters of the South Pacific. However, Gananoque, a charming town on the St. Lawrence River in Ontario, Canada, offers a different kind of island paradise. Nestled in the Thousand Islands region, this area is home to both Canadians and Americans. Some islands even boast castles, and these northern islands rival any tropical paradise despite their location in the St. Lawrence River. A popular legend about the Thousand Islands tells of the invention of Thousand Island dressing, supposedly created by a local woman and later given to a New York hotel around 1890, though there is no written proof to confirm this tale. I used to drive trucks for a living, crisscrossing the 48 contiguous states and Canada for a mid-sized company with a fleet of about 100 trucks. Drivers could choose between long hauls, regional routes, or local deliveries. After a long trip, we had the option to stay local for a week to spend time with our families or head out on another extended journey. Sometimes we could even take our wives along for the ride. Most trucking companies operating across the U.S. and Canada keep their drivers on the road for weeks, which significantly impacts family life. Many professions strain families, with the military being the toughest, followed closely by trucking and law enforcement. I worked construction during high school summers, so it was natural to start working full-time after graduation. By age 23, I was a skilled carpenter. At 19, I met Julie Simpson, an office clerk at a commercial bakery, and we got married at 21. We were happy until the banking and construction industries faced severe downturns. Julie and I decided I should try truck driving for better pay, despite the drawback of being away from home. The company offered to pay for my truck driving school if I committed to a year with them. After earning my Class A CDL in 3 weeks, I was paired with an experienced driving instructor who taught me how to handle loaded trailers weighing 16 to 36 tons. Scheduled for 5 weeks with my instructor, I convinced the safety department I was ready in 4. After a week in the city and another on local roads, everything went smoothly. I arranged for Julie to collect my paycheck on Fridays from the office, which worked well. After 9 months of local driving, my dispatcher Shirley presented me with a unique opportunity. I had a cargo run heading to Vancouver with a return load to to Gananoque. The young company owner, just a few years older than me, had recently bought one of the Thousand Islands, complete with 2 houses. He wanted the main house furnished with handcrafted furniture from Vancouver Island. Although the furniture would not be ready for a month, the operations department decided to surprise him with an early delivery. "Here is the deal," Shirley said. "You cannot tell anyone, Joe, not even his wife. I am not saying she will spill the beans, but since she picks up your paycheck, she might accidentally say something to the wrong person. The boss and his wife will be there next weekend around the time you get back. You will head to Vancouver, get loaded up, and then return. Is this something you'd be interested in?" Before I could respond, she interrupted. "Remember, whether you accept or not, you cannot tell anyone. Do you promise?" "I accept and promise not to tell anyone," I replied. "Good. Since you took it and because I like you, have you seen that brand new Peterbilt in the yard?" she asked. "Of course I saw it," I answered. "Well, it is yours. Load your things into it. Your cargo is in trailer 2353. You can leave in the morning. Call me when you get to Vancouver and be careful," she instructed. I went home and told Julie about my upcoming trip to the West Coast. She did not mind the good pay, but we both disliked my nearly 2-week absence. To make up for it, we cherished our night together. Love-making with Julie was always special. She was always eager for anything. Early in my trucking days, we took some intimate photos so I could have a reminder of her with me whenever I drove to Canada. Her photos stayed in a bag on my seat, never checked during the border searches. After the first time, crossing the border became routine with courteous Canadian officials. During the search, Shirley called to say the boss's furniture was ready and had been brought from the island that day. Unloading and loading took hours. Then I headed back east, fully loaded. Returning via Detroit, the drive to Montreal took about 9 hours. In Kingston, I parked overnight and called Shirley at 6 a.m. We loaded a barge for the island. The path was straightforward but slow. The forested island led to the guest house where I unexpectedly found my wife with the boss, her chest being rubbed with what I assumed was sunscreen. As I approached, I realized it was indeed sunscreen, but she was not his wife, VGJ, she was mine. They were caught off guard as I spoke to them briefly, then turned away without hearing their response. Back at the dock, realizing I was on an island, I noticed several boats moored there. Taking a boat was my only way back. With some basic knowledge from TV and movies, I found keys, started a boat, and hurried back to town, damaging it slightly on arrival. The boat drifted away as I left for Kingston Airport, buying a ticket for a flight to New York. Julie had left one message on my ringing phone. "Please call me back." Her message read, I called Shirley. "Good morning, Scott. Did you succeed?" "How long, Shirley?" I demanded, my voice tense. "How long for what?" She replied, clearly confused. "How long has he been sleeping with my wife?" I pressed, feeling my anger rising. "What are you talking about? My God, is she there? Is she okay?" Shirley responded, panic evident in her tone. "How long, Shirley?" I repeated more forcefully. "About 3 months. I am so sorry, Scott. His wife had to be there. Otherwise, I never would have sent you," she admitted, sounding defeated. "So you sent me there knowing he was fooling around with my wife? Who else knows?" I asked, feeling betrayed. "Just Joey and me," she confessed softly. "Thanks a lot, Shirley. Really, thanks for everything," I said, dripping with sarcasm. "Wait, where are you? What are you going to do?" "Hold on, he is on the other line." "I will be right back," she said urgently. "Forget it," I muttered as I ended the call. Now it all made sense. She did not want me to tell Julie about the trip because Julie would have told Bradley, ruining his little surprise. It was a small airport, and I could see everything and everyone coming and going. I kept looking to see if she or he would show up, but they did not. The flight was short, and after landing, I rented a car and drove 4 hours home. She was not there. I could not stop thinking about what I would do on the drive home. My phone rang again, and she left another message. "Scott, if you are home, I am on my way. Please do not do anything until I arrive and we can talk. We never had sex, Scott. We just fooled around. Please believe me. We never had sex." Jesus Christ, did she really think I was that stupid? I thought. At our apartment, I loaded my pickup truck with everything I wanted, then walked over to the terminal and calmly went to work. Shirley and Joey were there. Neither of them made eye contact with me when they saw me. "How much money do you owe me, Shirley?" I demanded. "Scott, IVDJ," she began. "Write me a check for everything the company owes me. Now," I insisted. "Sorry, Scott. Mr. Bradley said not to give you anything until he talked to you," she explained, looking uncomfortable. "Surely you owe me." "Thanks a lot," I replied sarcastically. "He said you crashed one of his boats," she added. "What else did he say? Was he bragging about sleeping with my wife? Did you all have a good laugh at my expense? Did Julie come here and tell you to keep me off the road as long as possible? Write me a check, Shirley, or I'll wreck this whole damn office," I threatened. It took her a couple of minutes to figure out what I was owed. She called accounting and told them to write me a check. I went to the accounting department and they had everything ready for me. I looked at it and changed my mind. "Transfer it to my card, please," I requested. "But Scott, direct deposit VDJ." They hesitated. "Now, please," I insisted. I gave them my card number and they did it. Bradley wouldn't be able to stop the direct deposit payment. Then I went to Bradley's house. One day we had been there on a picnic. My wife was probably there for more than just picnics. Mrs. Bradley opened the door. She looked and acted like she was sick. "What can I do for you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "My name is Scott Mann, and I used to drive for your husband. This morning I delivered furniture to your island and found your husband massaging my wife's bare chest with one hand while the other wandered below the waist. I thought you should know. Have a good day," I said. "Wait a minute, mister. What did you say your name was?" she asked, her eyes widening. "Mann, Scott Mann," I replied. "What is your wife's name?" she inquired, her face growing pale. "Julie Mann," I answered. "Did you see this morning?" she pressed. "With my own eyes," I confirmed. "Are you sure?" she asked again, disbelief in her voice. Lady, of course, I'm sure. Do you really think I would make something like that up about my own wife? I retorted. I walked to my truck and drove off, not knowing where I was going. I headed to my parents' house and quickly brought them up to speed. Mom always had coffee ready and offered me a cup. I took it and soon stretched out on the sofa. I closed my eyes, and the next thing I remember, I heard my father's voice. Julie, get off my porch or I'll call the police, he commanded. But I need to talk to Scott, she pleaded, her voice desperate. After what you did to him? Dad asked incredulously. No way. But he doesn't understand, she protested. Oh, I think he understands perfectly. You slept with his boss for 3 months. What's so hard to understand? Dad responded coldly. But he doesn't know why, she insisted, her voice breaking. Of course he knows. You're a cheater, that's why. Now get off my porch, he demanded firmly. She started screaming my name. Scott, talk to me, please. Scott, give me a chance to explain. Scott! It had been a long day, and soon I fell asleep again. The next morning I woke up early and walked to my truck. I still didn't know where I was going, but I had to go somewhere. I opened the door to sit down, and Julie was sleeping across the seat. She sat up when she heard the door open. I started to walk away, but she grabbed my hand and pulled me back. Please, Scott, listen to me. I had no choice, she pleaded, her eyes filled with tears. You either have sex with someone or you don't, right, Julie? I asked, my voice filled with anger. Everything was wrong, she admitted, her voice trembling. So you had sex voluntarily, I stated, not questioned. Scott, just give me a chance, she begged, her grip tightening. I repeat, you had sex voluntarily, I reiterated, my patience wearing thin. Okay, I had sex voluntarily, but besides, you lied. We never had sex. We just fooled around a little. She tried to downplay the situation. God, did you really expect me to believe that? Get out of my truck, I demanded, my voice icy. She wouldn't move, so I grabbed her wrist and yanked her outside, my fury barely contained. I sped off before she could pick herself up. I went to a fast food joint for breakfast, ordered a meal, and sat at a table, staring blankly as I ate. After finishing, I headed straight to the bank and split our money. My phone buzzed constantly, with numerous people leaving messages. My former boss, Ernest T. Bradley, left 2 particularly infuriating ones. Call me and let's talk, or I'll sue you for damaging my boat, and then you'll face charges for threatening my employees. Don VDET doubt me for a second. That was his first message. Listen, I slept with your wife. Deal with it. This happens all the time. She's not the first wife I've spent time with, and she won't be the last. Swallow your pride, take her back, and punish her if you have to. That's what she likes and wants. If you don't, maybe I'll keep seeing her. Now get back here and drive my truck home, or I'll report you for theft. Plus, you still owe me 3 months to pay for your truck driving school. That was his second message. What an arrogant jerk. Still in Canada, I decided to call his wife and see if I could meet her instead of confronting him directly. She agreed, and I played his messages for her. She had been unwell, but after hearing his voice, she looked even worse. At first, I wasn't sure if I believed you, but now I do. I'm going to make his life miserable. May I have a copy of this message? Mrs. Bradley asked. I made a copy for her. What are you going to do about your wife? She inquired. Divorce, obviously. I just don't know how to go about it, I replied. It's simple, she said. Find a good lawyer and hire them. It sounded straightforward enough. I left her house and returned to my parents. They asked me about my plan, and I told them the same thing I told Mrs. Bradley. My father then repeated, word for word, what she had told me. They convinced me, so I started looking for a lawyer. Not knowing where to begin, I started with the letter A in the phone book. I got to D before I found my lawyer, David Dennison, and we immediately hit it off. His entire family, including himself, were truck drivers until he had a car accident and was paralyzed from the waist down. He graduated from law school in a wheelchair and was the only member of his family not in the trucking business. However, they all knew and respected Ernest T. Bradley. Dennison emphasized Bradley's youth and business acumen multiple times. Everyone who knew him respected him. He was a prominent figure in society, sponsoring sports teams, arts programs, and donating to every charity that came his way. Dennison was skeptical when I first told him what I had discovered in Canada. He was on Bradley's side, and I was almost ready to find another lawyer. But I decided to play the messages for him. He finally started to believe me. "Wow, this will create quite a scandal if it gets out. How do you want to handle this, VJ, quietly or make a big splash?" Dennison asked. "All I want is to get a divorce as cheaply as possible. From what I understand, this won't make it into the newspapers. The reason for the divorce will be infidelity. If that means it gets talked about all over town, so be it. But there won't be any lies about irreconcilable differences. She cheated, and it will be recorded," I explained. "It can be difficult if that message is all you have. Courts today almost require visual evidence, especially when accusing a man of his stature," Dennison cautioned. "Well, let's try it," I decided. "Fine, we will serve her the documents in the next few days. Do you know where she might be?" he asked. "Either at work at the bakery, at home, or in Canada with him, I guess," I replied. "We can't serve documents to her in Canada, so we'll try at home or work," he noted. "That works for me. You can contact me by mobile or at my parents'," I said. Tired of living with my parents, I spent the next few days looking for my own apartment. I found one that wasn't the fanciest or best in town, but it was mine. A week later, Julie was served at work. My father owned a small welding shop. I never had any interest in welding, but that started to change. He convinced me to come work for him just to get me out of my apartment. Both he and my mother thought I spent too much time indoors. I considered working for another transport company, but I wasn't too enthusiastic about it. So I went to the welding shop. My dad had a pickup truck with portable welding equipment, and he mostly fixed things. Occasionally, a client would ask for something special, and my father would prepare it. Julie tried to talk to me several times, but after she was served, everything went through our lawyers. Our first meeting was about a month after she was served. Her lawyer, of course, tried to get the infidelity charge thrown out. I categorically refused. Bradley was named in the divorce petition, and Julie desperately didn't want his name to appear anywhere near the divorce suit for infidelity. "This could ruin his reputation in society. He doesn't deserve it," she objected. I exploded. "Are you serious? He's a wife-stealing scumbag and should be exposed to the public." Julie intervened. "If you had treated your wife better, he wouldn't have been able to steal her." This led to a heated argument between us, which could only be stopped by placing us in separate rooms. After we cooled down and were back in the same room, the tension was palpable. She again tried to get me to remove Bradley's name. "I'm not changing it, so drop it. Why are you so determined to protect him? Are you planning to marry him? Are you still seeing him?" "FYI, yes, I'm still seeing him," she admitted, her lawyer burying his face in his hands. Without lifting his head, he groaned, "You just confessed to infidelity in front of your husband and 2 witnesses. This is the worst move you could make." "I don't care," she snapped. Then turning to me, she added, "Yes, I'm going to marry him as soon as he's divorced." "So you think he loves you?" I asked, incredulous. "Absolutely," she said confidently. I placed my phone on the table and scrolled through Bradley's messages to her. "That's not what he told me. He's just stringing you along." Mr. Dennison chuckled, pulling an envelope from his briefcase and sliding it across the table to Julie. Her lawyer intercepted it, opened it, and reviewed the contents, e.g. a note and a series of photos. Julie looked at the photos first, then read the note aloud. "Mr. Mann, these may help with your divorce. The first 5 were taken on the island 3 weeks ago with his hairdresser's wife. The next 6 are from last week when I was away. He picked up a woman at a bar. It was just another fling like your wife," the note signed Cynthia revealed. The photos showed Bradley with the 2 women in various compromising positions, leaving no doubt about his affairs. Julie shoved the photos away and stormed out of the room, not reappearing until court, where we divided everything: VJ money, jewelry, china, and her clothes. She stayed in our apartment. Bradley's reputation tanked swiftly. His sports teams folded, and Cynthia received half of everything, including their home and half the moving company. He only kept the Canadian island because she didn't want it. His attempt to bill my lawyer for truck driving school, claiming breach of contract, met with a colorful response from Mr. Dennison. Cynthia called to disregard it, offering me an operations manager job at a trucking company. Tempting, but I declined. Over time, I discovered a knack for metalwork, thanks to Dad's guidance. Dating came and went, rarely lasting. Bradley's business sold and Cynthia disappeared. He occasionally surfaced, but didn't recognize me from our time together. I found joy welding and crafting metal goods in the shop, like weather vanes and mailbox stands. On a quiet Sunday, Julie showed up, wanting to talk. "Can we have a conversation?" she asked. "I have nothing to say," I replied. "Just listen," she pleaded. "I have no excuse. We had a good life, VJ, money, love. So why Bradley? Partly his lies about you being away, mistreatment. He said every trucker strays, and I believed him. Shirley fed it, saying Bradley treated me well. Mrs. Bradley supposedly had flings to improve their marriage, all lies, but I fell for it. Now I know better." I sat silently, listening. When I thought she had calmed down, I spoke. "Why are you telling me all this now?" "I don't know. I don't think I ever really wanted to tell you the truth. I didn't Timit want you to know how foolish I was. I always thought IVDJTM had come up with a story where it was all your fault. But driving past your shop, I saw you and stopped. I didn't know what I was going to say, just that I had to say something. But what I said turned out to be the truth." "What did you hope to gain from this?" I asked. "Just for you to know that none of this was your fault. These were all my own selfish desires and the lies he created for me. I also wanted you to know that whether you believe it or not, I never stopped loving you," she replied. "That VJRTMM's where I think you VJTM are lying. I don't think you can truly love someone and lie or cheat on them. You did both. You even wanted to marry him. Are you still seeing him?" I challenged. "I can't explain it any better than I have already, and I want me to try to make you believe me. And no, I've DTM not with him. I haven't VJMD seen him since the day in the lawyer's office when I saw those photographs," she responded. She sat silently for a few more moments, watching me work. "I guess I should go," she finally said, standing up. "Scott," she looked at me, "is there any way you could forgive me enough to give you another chance?" I shook my head. "You know where the door is," I replied. After she left, I reflected on my ex-boss and ex-wife, confirming my thoughts about them. I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't VJTMT caught my boss on the island. Would I still be trucking, settling for what was left? I chose to make weather vanes and take the risk of going broke. One day, a flyer for a Renaissance festival arrived. IVJJTMD never heard of it before and learned that Maryland claims jousting and lacrosse as official sports. Curious, I attended the festival nearby. There I saw vendors selling armor, swords, and more. Inspired, I researched and crafted shields and swords, then sold them at festivals across the country. Teddy Wickoff helped me sell my items, marking the start of a new business. I continued making and selling swords and shields, gaining momentum. During this time, I took on a challenging repair job for Mr. James's damaged gate. Despite initial doubts, I completed the task with help from his daughter Hannah, who brought me iced tea. She kept me company as we bonded over the project, and I developed a keen interest in armor making, pondering its profitability. My dating life was tumultuous, with one relationship abruptly ending after I met a woman at the library. Later, at a cinema, I ran into Hannah with her boyfriend. I recognized her voice immediately and overheard a heated exchange. "If you touch me there again, I'll cut off your balls," she snapped. His hand dropped from her shoulder and she stormed off. Her boyfriend pleaded with her to return. I decided to intervene, something I've TMD never done before. "Excuse me, Hannah, are you okay?" I asked. She glanced at me, taking a moment to recognize me. "No, that guy has more arms than an octopus, and I'm tired of fighting him off." "Can you give me a ride home?" she asked. "Sure," I agreed. As we walked to my truck, another guy approached her. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Now I am," she replied. "Do you want me to take you home?" he offered. Without looking at me, she said yes, and they headed to his car, leaving me standing there feeling invisible. I watched them drive off, shook my head, and went home. A few days later, I was back at her house. Mr. Jameson had asked me to fix some railings along the walkway. When Hannah saw me, she came over to say hello but didn't mention the movie incident. Annoyed at being completely ignored, I wasn't in the mood to chat. She took the hint and left. I returned the next day with spare parts. The railing was standard, so parts were easy to get. As she walked towards the pool, Hannah stopped to chat. I mostly ignored her. I enjoyed our conversations while working on the gate, but after the theater incident, not so much. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. "Do you remember what happened at the movies last week?" I replied. "You mean with the octopus guy?" she clarified. "Yes," I confirmed. "What about it?" she asked. "You asked me to give you a ride home. Do you remember that?" I pressed. "Of course," she answered. "What happened after that?" I inquired. "Nothing. Jimmy showed up and took me home," she said. "And you didn't see anything wrong with that?" I asked. "No," she responded, confused. "Not if you didn't see anything, I guess," I said, grabbing a hammer and making noise with the metal, hoping Chevy JKTM to take the hint and leave. It didn't be JJTM to make sense. She was getting impatient. "I don't get you," she said. I looked her in the eye. "That's the problem," I stated. I resumed hammering and she got the message and left. The rest of the day was spent finishing the railings. My interest in armor grew, and I researched its construction extensively. I crafted my first piece and felt proud of it. I sent a photo to Teddy to get his opinion. "Stick with shields and swords," he advised, laughing. "UVD more good at that. Armor requires a lot more work to sell." A few days later, I was at a local bar watching a baseball game when Hannah sat down next to me. "I'm meeting friends for a drink. Want to join us?" she asked. "No thanks, I'm good here," I replied. She got up to leave but hesitated. "Are you ever going to tell me what I did to make you mad?" she asked. "If I have to explain it, I feel sorry for you. Enjoy your drinks," I said. I finished my beer and was about to leave when she returned. "Oh my God, Scott, I didn't mean to ignore you in the theater. That guy made me so angry I didn't know what I was doing." "Please accept my apologies," she pleaded. I assumed someone at her table overheard our conversation and corrected her. "Apologies accepted," I said. She smiled. "Will you join us now? Please at least have a drink." "I owe you that much." I smiled back. "Sure, thank you." They all drank, and the evening turned out to be enjoyable. Two of them, whose names I don't recall, reminded Hannah of her manners throughout the evening. I felt sympathetic towards her. The group eventually dispersed, and we all left. I left with Jenny. I sat next to her at the table and inquired about Hannah. She informed me they had been friends for a long time. "Look, Scott, I'm not her best friend, but we're close. There VDJTM's something about you she likes. She regrets how she treated you," Jenny explained. "She told the whole table that?" I asked. "Yes," Jenny replied. "You have to give her credit for that. Do you have her number?" "No," I replied. "Give me your phone," she said. I handed it over and she entered Hannah's number. "Give her a call," she suggested. The following week, one morning at the store, Hannah walked in. I assumed she got the address from her father. "Did you have fun last time?" I asked. "I enjoyed it. I like your friends," she replied. I said, "That's good, but do you like me? You did apologize after all." She replied, "I remember I apologized." I nodded. "Yeah, I remember too." "Then why aren't we friends?" she asked. I smiled. "I think we're working on it. An apology doesn't instantly make us friends. It means you recognize a mistake and regret it. That's why you apologize. The other person may or may not accept it. I accepted yours, but that doesn't mean we're best friends now. It just means I acknowledge your sincerity and that you've sorry." "It was sincere," she assured me. "I believe you," I said. "Good, so let's go out to dinner," she proposed. I chuckled. "Why not? VDJTM's a good step toward building our friendship." "How about tonight?" she suggested, and so it was. Hannah and I had dinner, and our friendship flourished. We dated for 2 months before becoming more serious, eventually getting engaged. But that was just the beginning. Our relationship thrived, and soon we wanted to spend all our time together. Chev DTM'd visit the store just to be with me, and we both cherished those moments. I could work while she read. We didn't always need to talk or interact. Just being there for each other was enough. One late night in bed during a candid conversation, she surprised me by revealing that Jonah Jameson was NVDJ TMT, her biological father. Her mother and Jameson had been married for only 7 years. She had an older brother, and their father passed away 2 years after their mother married Jameson. Their father had owned a trucking company, and her brother Ernest wanted to take over and manage it. He was 6 years older than Hannah, and many doubted his capability due to his age. However, Hannah and her mother agreed to let him try. He proved capable, and the company prospered. I got out of bed, poured us drinks, and returned. "Tell me about your brother," I asked. "I've told you most of it, the important parts anyway. The gist is, the transport company was doing well, so well that he and my ex-sister-in-law bought an island in Canada. Then some woman got her hooks into him, and he ended up divorced, selling the company. Supposedly this woman VDJGTM's husband started driving for him, thinking they could make money together. She seduced him, setting it up so her husband would catch them together on the island. My sister-in-law divorced my brother, took half the company, and they had to sell. What a pair of thieves," she recounted. I downed my drink in one go. "How much did they extort from him?" I asked. "My brother never told me, but they got something," she replied. "Do you remember their names?" I inquired. "I did, but I forgot," she answered. I decided to be honest with her, though I feared it would end our relationship. I opted for one last physical encounter. Afterward, I almost convinced myself not to reveal my identity because the lovemaking had been unparalleled. Knowing the truth would likely spell the end for us. Preparing to leave, I dressed, sat on the edge of her bed, and began. "The time has come. Let VJJ La TMMs revisit the story of your brother's divorce." "Was what you told me the official version or his perspective?" I asked. "He told me, so I took it as official." "Why do you ask?" she replied. "Because everything happened completely differently," I said. "What do you mean?" she asked, puzzled. I recounted the true events. Halfway through, she abruptly got out of bed, still unclothed, and listened intently. In conclusion, I asserted that Julie and I had merely ended in divorce, not extortion. Her response was swift. "You're lying! Get out!" "I'm not lying. This is the truth," I insisted. She hurled a pillow at me. "You're lying! Get out and don't return with these lies." I departed, disliking such endings, yet cherishing the memory of our final closeness. Life moved on. I experienced another social lull, unable to find a way out of my rut. One evening, feeling indulgent, I dined at a posh restaurant. After finishing my main course, I scanned the room and spotted Hannah and her brother a few tables away with a small cake adorned with candles. I signaled for the bill, paid it, then boldly approached their table and sat down. They regarded me like an alien. Her brother spoke first. "Are you sure you're at the right table?" he asked, clearly not recognizing me. "Indeed, and I think it's time you told your sister the truth about your divorce. She knows about it," I said. "Who the hell are you?" he retorted. "But evidently she doesn't know the real truth, so you need to set the record straight," I said firmly. "Screw you," he shot back. "Scott, what are you doing?" she nearly shouted. "Get out of here." Miraculously, the waiter appeared. "Is everything all right here?" he inquired. "This guy," Hannah said, pointing at me, "sat down uninvited and harassed my brother. I want him to leave." "Certainly, sir," the waiter responded. The waiter insisted, "Sir, you must leave." Facing Bradley, I shook my head. "You're unbelievable," I said, feeling a mix of frustration and contempt. "Just go, Scott," Hannah demanded, her voice tinged with exhaustion. Leaving, I knew this might be the last time I ever saw her. Back in my workshop, I threw myself into my projects, focusing on crafting axes and chainmail. The following weekend, I had a festival lined up. I packed shields, axes, and chainmail samples for Teddy, who had secured me a vendor pass. At the event, he introduced me to Diana, who was dressed in period attire, a gown that was both elegant and eye-catching. "Diana, this is Scott. Scott, meet Diana." Teddy introduced us. "Scott crafts our pieces and has some new items today." "Nice to meet you," I said, retrieving the new items from my truck. Teddy and Diana admired them like rare artifacts amidst the bustling festival. We shared a meal and soaked in the lively atmosphere. I wanted to ask more about Diana, but the opportunity never arose. Teddy later mentioned she and her sister organized festivals nationwide. "If you hadn't shown up, she would have," he said. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "I would have found a motel," I replied. "No chance, they're all booked," he said with a chuckle. The next day, Diana was a hit, and we had a profitable weekend selling out our stock. After the festival, Teddy convinced me to stay another night before heading home. I rushed to craft more chainmail upon returning, barely sleeping all weekend. Around 3 a.m., there was a knock on my door. It was Hannah, looking disheveled and escorted by the police. "Are you Scott Mann?" one officer asked. "Yes," I replied, puzzled. "Is she your girlfriend?" he inquired. "I know her, but she's not my girlfriend," I clarified. "Are you sure?" "She insists you're her boyfriend," he pressed. "Not even close. Last time I saw her, she called me a liar and kicked me out of her house," I explained. "We're taking her with us," he said. "Where are you taking her?" I asked, concerned. "To spend the night at the station," he replied. "No, don't do that. I'll take care of her," I offered, feeling a sense of responsibility. "Are you sure?" he questioned. "No, but I can't let her spend the night at the station," I affirmed. I helped her inside and settled her on my bed, the only one available. I considered sleeping on the couch, which was preferable to the air mattress in Teddy's tent, but I preferred my own bed, even if there was a snoring drunk woman in it. The next morning I woke up and went to work. I heard nothing from her all day and expected her to still be asleep when I returned home. I was wrong. She was gone and the apartment was spotless. I searched for a note but found nothing. Despite my efforts, I didn't manage to complete a single new piece of chainmail. Teddy stopped by and picked up the shields, swords, and axes I had stashed. We debated hiring help, but skilled metalworkers were hard to find. We decided on training instead, placing ads in the local newspaper and the festival newsletter. One Friday evening, I was in the workshop working on a machine to speed up chainmail production. The few available on the market weren't quite what I needed, so I aimed to improve on them. It was late, and I was exhausted when there was a knock on the door. It was a sober-looking Hannah. "Thank you for getting me out of that situation with the police," she said. I nodded. "No problem. Everything okay now?" She nodded back, looking unsure of what to say next. We stood there in awkward silence. "Look, it's been a long day and I need to get some sleep," I said, gently moving past her, closing and locking the door, then heading to my car. "Good night," I said as I was about to get into the car. I heard her voice. "You were right. My brother lied. I'm sorry." I simply waved over my shoulder, got into the car, and drove home. My fascination with armor continued to grow. After Teddy critiqued my initial attempt, I delved deep into research and created another suit that became the template for future pieces. They were labor-intensive, time-consuming, and incredibly challenging, but I thrived on the difficulty. Feeling ready, I showcased it at the next festival, where Teddy was impressed. While we could have sold it several times over, we chose to keep it as a sample of my craftsmanship. Visitors admired it, commented, and if interested in purchasing, we discussed customization options. My festival ventures were both prosperous and fulfilling. I bought a trailer to transport my tools and materials, enabling me to move between festivals. Sometimes I worked at a booth, engaging with visitors, while other times I crafted in the private vendor area. One evening between festivals, I talked with my father and marveled at the unexpected success of Renaissance metalwork. Who would have thought so many people were interested in armor and willing to pay for it? "These items aren't cheap," I remarked. After the festival season ended, I began dating a woman I met at a local car dealership. I was considering buying a new truck since my dad's welding truck was old. The plan was to outfit my new truck with welding equipment, sell the old one, and possibly upgrade to something newer and bigger. While she was getting her car serviced, I admired a new truck outside the showroom. We struck up a conversation and ended up exchanging phone numbers. A week later, we went on our first date, followed by several more. One evening after I drove her home, I found myself reflecting on the twists and turns of life and the unexpected paths it had taken me on. She invited me inside, and we shared another drink while I sat on her sofa. Standing before me, she started unbuttoning her blouse. "Do you mind if I get more comfortable?" she asked. "Not at all, as long as I get to watch and enjoy the view," I replied. She grinned. "That's the whole idea. I undress while you watch, then you undress while I watch, and then we see where the night takes us." "Seems like you've planned everything out," I observed. "Oh, absolutely," she said as her blouse came off, followed by her skirt. I reached for her underwear, but she gently pushed my hands away. "Let me handle this. Just sit back and enjoy the show. You do enjoy watching, don't you?" "I've never really paid attention before," I admitted. She laughed, a deep, throaty sound. "I hope you're better in bed than you are at lying." Her bra joined her blouse on the floor. "You're pretty confident, aren't you?" "Very," she said. "Now it's your turn." I started unbuttoning my shirt. "Slow down, Tiger. We have all night. Let me enjoy the show." I slowed my movements and she licked her lips. I kicked off my shoes, unbuckled my belt, and unzipped my trousers. As I began to pull my pants down, she placed her hands over mine and knelt, following my pants to the floor. She stopped when she was on her knees looking up at me. "What's next, the t-shirt or the shorts?" she asked. "Which do you prefer?" I responded. "The t-shirt. Save the best for last," she instructed. I removed my t-shirt and tossed it aside. She picked it up and brought it to her nose. I love the scent of a man," she murmured. I left her place around 3 a.m. The whole drive home, I compared her to Hannah and the last time we had been together, unable to decide who was better. The relationship with the woman from the dealership lasted a solid 4 months before we broke up. Later that evening, I noticed several missed calls and messages from Hannah. One read, "Scott, please call me as soon as you get this message. It doesn't matter what time it is, please." Taking her at her word, I dialed her number. She answered after 2 rings. "Hello, Scott," she said, her voice sounding slightly slurred. "I woke you up, didn't I?" "I think I dozed off waiting for your call." "All right, I'm calling. What's so urgent?" I asked. "I wanted you to know my brother lied about his divorce. You were right, and I'm sorry." "You've already apologized for that. Is there something else?" I inquired. "Yes." There was a pause. "Can we see each other again? I miss you," she confessed. "Honestly, there's no way you and I can see each other knowing who your brother is and what he did with my wife. If we got serious, it would inevitably cause problems with him, and I'd always feel uncomfortable. I'm not putting myself through that." I heard her crying. "I knew you'd say that, but I hoped you wouldn't. Goodbye, Scott." Renaissance festivals were back in full swing. I secured my passes, bought a tent and camping gear, and hit the road. I spent most of my time assisting Teddy at his booth. When not doing that, I worked on creating new items for sale. My armor-making skills had improved significantly during the off-season, and at each festival we sold at least one piece. While demand was high, each piece required a substantial amount of time to craft. 2 days after closing one festival, Teddy asked if I could join him at the next one. I agreed, and since he was nearby, he brought his trailer with everything I needed. I loaded up my truck and left my trailer at home, taking his instead. I worked 3 festivals in a row, garnering attention from visitors. I even demonstrated my chain mail machine. By the 3rd festival, I felt a sense of accomplishment. The next event on my schedule was near Philadelphia and spanned 11 days, making it one of the largest in the country. Unlike others, which ran Thursday to Sunday, this one started on a Thursday, continued through the following weekend, and ended the weekend after. I spent 2 weeks at home preparing materials, primarily focusing on armor. My father became adept at crafting shields, axes, and swords. I worked late into the night, and one evening my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a very intoxicated Hannah stumbling into my arms. "Is this your girlfriend?" one of the 2 police officers accompanying her asked. If it keeps her out of trouble tonight, I guess so, I half joked. I guided her to my bedroom and gently laid her on the bed. I showered, shaved, changed into pajamas, and set out clothes for the next day, anticipating she might return in a similar state. The next morning I checked on Hannah, still asleep. I debated whether to stay and attempt a conversation or simply let it go. That evening I went to work. Upon returning home, I found the house immaculate. She had even cleaned the kitchen and bathroom. My toothbrush and toothpaste were in different places, so I rearranged them. Both were wet, as was the washcloth on the sink. I took a frozen enchilada from the freezer and heated it up for dinner, though I didn't eat much. The following morning I departed for a festival in Philadelphia, bringing along all my materials for shields and chainmail. My plan was to conduct numerous demonstrations. The first day was incredible, and it only improved from there. On that initial Sunday, a large crowd watched me nearly all day long. By the time the festival closed for the day, Teddy and I were exhausted but satisfied. Evenings in the vendor area were always lively, the epicenter of the festival party scene. People cooked, played music, drank, rehearsed sword fights, repaired or tried on armor, tended to horses, and engaged in various activities. It wasn't uncommon to pass a tent and hear sounds of intimacy or see a camper gently swaying. After things quieted down, I sat outside my tent, thinking how nice it would be to have someone inside to cuddle with. Hannah might be free, but I couldn't bring myself to call her. Monday GJTMM's crowds were moderate but steady throughout the day. While demonstrating the intricate process of assembling chain mail, I looked up and saw Hannah watching me. I continued my demo, inviting questions from onlookers, but none were posed. Eventually the crowd dispersed, leaving Hannah standing there. "Do you enjoy doing this?" she asked. "Yes, I do," I replied. "You're good at it," she said before turning and blending into the crowd. I didn't attempt to see her again until the end of the event on Wednesday, when my parents arrived with more shields and axes. I showed them around, although they didn't seem entirely pleased with what I was doing. My mother particularly disapproved of my tent setup. The rest of the week and weekend went well, leaving Teddy and me satisfied. Upon returning home, I took a day off. My father helped me with chainmail work in the shop. As we discussed plans for a larger motorhome and trailer, the door opened, and Hannah walked in. "This festival was amazing. A few friends and I are heading to the next one nearby," she said. "We even talked about going in armor." "Sounds like fun," I replied vaguely. "Will you be there?" she asked. "Probably," I answered, continuing to work, not making eye contact. "Can I come with you?" she inquired. "Not practical since I'll be there from Wednesday to Sunday," I said. "No worries. We can get a motel room," she suggested. "Highly unlikely. Those book up months in advance," I explained. "Where do you sleep?" she asked. "In a tent," I replied. "That sounds cozy. Maybe we could share," she proposed. "It's a small tent," I said. "Small can be cozy," she said. My father glanced at me, grinning, and excused himself. Hannah stepped closer and touched my face. "Listen, Scott, I know my brother had an affair with your ex-wife, and that complicates things, but we can still be friends with benefits, right? We enjoy each other, Don we. I hesitated. "You've are amazing, but the idea of sharing doesn't sit well with me. I can't just have a physical relationship with you knowing you might leave for someone else. We both deserve real relationships." She kissed me softly. "You don't get it. I'm already in a relationship with you. I love you and intend to honor this arrangement." After another kiss, she left. My father must have watched her leave. "What are you going to do about her?" he asked. I kept staring at the door. "I honestly don't know, Dad. What do you think?" "You've got two choices. Come to terms with her brother's affair, or move on and keep a low profile. Maybe ITVDJTM's time to consider what your mother and I discussed." "What's that?" I asked. "We'll talk about it over dinner." Later, he filled my mother in on Hannah. "Maybe it's time to give Scott that gift we talked about," he suggested. "I think you've right," she said. "What gift?" I asked. "I don't like the idea of you sleeping in a tent," my mother said. "We've DJ and I are going to buy you a motorhome," my father announced. Arguing seemed pointless, and I thought it was a good idea. It took a week to find the right one. Since I already had a Class A CDL, I didn't VDJTM need driving lessons. I hugged them both, thanked them, and bought a trailer to tow behind it. I set it up so I could work inside if needed, connecting power from the van to the trailer. It was an excellent setup. Teddy became envious when he saw my trailer. "Have you christened it yet?" he asked. "What do you mean?" I replied. "Have you had lovemaking in it yet?" he clarified. "No," I replied. He grinned. "Do you mind if Diana and I do?" I chuckled. "Go right ahead." He texted her, and she arrived in 10 minutes. Hand in hand, they went off, laughing when they returned. "We wanted you to be the first to know. Diana and I are getting married," he announced. She hugged me. "Your van clinched it. Thank you." That weekend, I didn't get to see much of them, but my van smelled like perfume when they were done. Back home for a week, Hannah spotted the van and dropped by. IVDJJTM, Dee'd been in a dry spell and knew I could get her into bed. I gave her a tour, and she was suitably impressed. "This is much better than a tent," she remarked. "Yes, indeed," I agreed. "It VDJJTM's got a double bed, doesn't VJTM it?" she asked. "Yes, and a sizable closet." "And I bet this shower can fit too," she suggested. "It probably can," I said. We were in the van's living area when she approached me. "Has it been christened yet?" she asked coyly. "What do you mean?" I replied, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Has anyone had lovemaking in it yet?" she pressed. "No, it's brand new," I fibbed. "Well," she almost whispered, "we could do it now or wait until this weekend since we've DTM in your parents' VDTM yard." "Now isn't really feasible. What do you mean this weekend?" I asked. "After the festival ends each evening," she suggested. "We could then." "Sorry, this is Southern Virginia. Even if I said yes, ITDJJTM's too far a drive for you." "You VDTM are right," she conceded, "so I'll just come with you." "Did you not hear what I just said?" I asked, exasperated. She started tugging at my shirt, pulling me closer. "Scott, you admitted I'm the best you've ever had, and you're the best I've ever had. Plus, I'm in love with you, and I know you like me more than just a little. We should just have lovemaking whenever we can. Also, I have a dress that would be perfect for the festival. Everyone will love it, especially you." She kissed me softly and tenderly, as if she were truly in love with me. "I'm leaving here at 5 a.m. on Tuesday. I won't wait for you," I stated firmly. "You don't have to," she replied. And she was right. She unpacked her clothes, stocked the kitchen, and by midnight on Monday she was in the van's bed. As soon as I got behind the wheel Tuesday morning, she came and sat in the passenger seat wearing only a robe. I knew because she glared at me every time I glanced her way. She met Diana, and both wore low-cut dresses that accentuated their curves. I couldn't wait for the workday to end. At closing time, Teddy and I shut down the booth while Diana and Hannah were cooking dinner in the van. Upon our arrival, I discovered Hannah VJTM's cooking was delicious. After Teddy and Diana left, Hannah asked if I wanted to shower with her. There was enough space for two, and from there we moved to the bed. That night marked the beginning of many nights and days spent enjoying each other in that van. This was 3 years ago. Initially, her family tried to convince her that I only let her travel with me to spite her brother. He had convinced them that Julie and I were the cause of his divorce, not him. Obviously, none of them had been in court to see the truth, and like Hannah, they believed him. Hannah provided them copies of my divorce decree and her ex-sister-in-law's statements. He stayed in town and was responsible for a couple more divorces before deciding that the other side of the country would be better for his health. Hannah now has several new dresses for festivals that don't highlight her belly as much. She never said she wanted to be a wife before becoming a mother, but I know it's on her mind. It's on my mind, too.